Damaged Defenders by Scherza. Chapter 38. Frigga. Frigga's return to the palace garnered an enormous amount of attention. Thankfully, Frigga knew this had more to do with her frantic race for the bridge than anything else. She, Odin, and Heimdall had been too far out for anyone in the city proper to observe what had happened. Everyone was wondering what could possibly have driven her to race for the bridge like the fire demons of Muspelheim were after her. She rode her horse to the stables and waved aside the horsemaster. The least she could do for Aiden after that unexpected race was to tend to her herself. Aiden, of course, decided to prance and dance in place, clearly more energized by the abrupt top-speed race than worn out by it. Frigga gave an amused smile and hummed gently to the chestnut mare until she calmed somewhat and permitted her saddle and bridle to be removed and allowed herself to be groomed. Once Aiden was settled in her stall, Frigga headed for the palace proper. She stopped the first servant she crossed paths with. "There is to be an emergency audience in the throne room in 2 hours' time. I want every palace resident in attendance, and as many of the city dwellers as can be summoned in so brief a time," she commanded. "See to it that word is spread among your fellows. All duties are suspended until the audience is complete." The servant eyed Gungnir as he bowed low, then raced off nearly as fast as Frigga had done so short a time ago. Frigga had little doubt that he would spread the word as fast as he possibly could. To be the source of such a piece of information and gossip was a much coveted thing among the servants. She headed for her own chambers, summoning her personal servant, Fulla. "Fulla, if you would draw me a bath, then tend to your own appearance. I have commanded that all people appear in the throne room 2 hours hence," Frigga said. "Of course, your majesty." Fulla eyed Gungnir with much the same look the servant Frigga had stopped earlier eyed it, then hustled into Frigga's private bathing room. Frigga went to her closet to choose what she would wear. She knew she had to make a definite statement. It took but a few moments to realize that nothing in her closet would suit. Oh, it was all highest quality, and much of it had been designed to project a certain image, especially to foreign ambassadors seeking audience, and filled those purposes admirably. It was not, however, suitable for what she needed now. Frigga shook her head with a sigh. She was going to have to craft something from scratch. Then Frigga smiled. Perhaps not quite from scratch. It would by necessity be no more than an illusion, but it would be enough until she could get an identical outfit crafted. She took her inspiration from Odin, Thor, Loki, and Sif's armors as she began crafting the illusion. It was largely gold, like Odin and Loki's, with a breastplate identical to Sif's. Instead of the leather skirting Sif favored, Frigga decided on a fitted jacket much like Loki's, done in gold with green accents, again to honor her youngest son. Over her shoulders, in a direct nod to both Odin and Thor, was a brilliant red cape. The helm she designed was somewhere between Odin's and Loki's, the horns not quite as thick as the ones on Odin's helm, mostly because she would never be able to wear such a heavy helm if it was real, and not as tall or curved back as far as Loki's. The end result was quite handsome, if she did say so herself, and would suit her purposes admirably, as it would bring to mind both her husband and her sons, and their power. Power that most in the realm hesitated to bring to bear against them. As she was not a warrior, the average Asgardian would need the reminder of that sort of power for a time until she had established herself. She could very easily defend herself, even without Gungnir, but she would rather not be forced to do so. Once she'd gotten the illusion of her attire settled, bathed, and then donned the illusionary armor, she made her way to the small antechamber Thor had been waiting in prior to his coronation. There she waited until the 2 hours were complete. She did, after all, have an entrance to make. Her only regret was that Thor and Loki weren't here. That said, it was for the best that they were not. The people would look to Thor for leadership he was not truly ready to give, and Loki did not need the reminder of the day his world had fallen apart. There would come a day when he would not react badly to reminders of that day, she knew, but it would not come for some time yet. Precisely as the second hour rang, Frigga glided through the antechamber doors. The throne room was, if anything, even more packed than it had been for Thor's coronation. The palace guard had formed a passage between them as they had that day. The chatter that had filled the room died away as Frigga made her way down that passage. Then, when she had gotten about halfway down, the talking started back up, slowly at first, but quickly getting speed, if not volume, as people reacted to the sight of her carrying Gungnir and wearing armor. Frigga paid no attention to any of it. She mounted the steps to the throne, then whirled around, adding a touch of magic to the turn so the illusionary cloak she wore flared dramatically around her. She was pleased when the throne room went utterly silent. She cast a subtle spell to give her voice more volume, since she couldn't boom and bellow with the same sort of volume Odin and Thor managed with ease. "Hear me, people of Asgard," she said. Thanks to her spell, her voice was as clear to the people in the furthest corners of the throne room as it was to those standing closest to the throne. "For crimes against Asgard and her heirs, Odin Allfather has been stripped of his powers and banished, never to return." Easier to tell them that than tell them he'd only stay until he learned his lesson. For one thing, there was no guarantee Odin ever would. For another, people would be far more inclined to see her as a mere interim placeholder and remain loyal to Odin. That could not be allowed under the circumstances. There was an immediate susurrus of sound as people reacted to that. Frigga knew she'd get grief later, but she looked forward to crossing swords with the complainers. It was going to be fun. For too long had people dismissed her as merely Odin's wife. They would soon discover that she was his equal in power, but far sneakier. Loki had to learn it somewhere after all, and Odin certainly wasn't anything approaching subtle or sly. "Prince Thor and Prince Loki are needed on Midgard for reasons I will divulge shortly. I therefore assume the throne as Queen of Asgard," Frigga said. Once the reaction to that had died down, she continued. "People of Asgard, hear me. A time of great strife is at hand. I bring grave news. Thanos has awakened," she said. There was an instantaneous outcry of horror from the eldest of those present, those of an age with Odin and Heimdall or slightly younger, of an age to remember the last time Thanos had run amok. "He has fashioned himself an army on the far side of Yggdrasil, and is even now making his way to Midgard. Thor and Loki stand ready to defend Midgard, and Midgard is even now gathering its own defenders. But we who have fought Thanos in the past know this will not be enough." She slammed the butt of Gungnir on the floor. "Lord Tyr, step forward." Tyr was Asgard's general, and had been hailed on Midgard as a god of war. It was he that had stood beside Odin when Thanos was battled, before being banished from 6 of the 9 realms and the Jotun conflict on Midgard. He looked enough like Thor to be mistaken for his older brother. Indeed, some of the feats attributed to Tyr or Thor had actually been done by the other. Tyr stepped forward and dropped to one knee at the foot of the steps, one fist over his heart. "My queen, what is your command?" "Prepare our troops. If Midgard falls, Thanos can use it as a base from which to attack the rest of the realms, regardless of his inability to step foot on our soil. He will be within striking distance of Midgard within a year. Coordinate with Thor and Loki. They will have information on the local defenders and their capabilities." "We will be ready, my queen," Tyr vowed, then gained his feet and backed up to return to his place. She turned to the court ambassadors. "Go to Vanaheim, Alfheim, and Nidavellir. Speak to the kings. Warn them of the danger. Remind them of their duty to their realm, and to all the realms in this matter. I will journey to Svartalfheim and Jotunheim myself, and do likewise. The warriors 3 and Lady Sif will accompany me as guard." Fortunately, no one would question their queen, known for her ability to do magic, going to the 2 realms most known for their magical abilities. Leaving the throne unattended was not optimal, but under the circumstances it was the only thing they could do. She turned her attention back to the General Assembly. Go now. Hone your swords, shine your shields. War is coming, and Asgard will triumph. That got her a rousing cheer as people hurried off to spread the word. Frigga stopped Tyr before he could leave. A further task I have for you, Lord Tyr, that I did not wish to announce to the assemblage. The vault holds a great many exceedingly destructive weapons. I bid you destroy all that are too dangerous to be used, and outfit such warriors as are worthy with whatever weapons as can be used without danger to themselves or Asgard. Frigga commanded. She had never liked Odin's little treasure trove. It was entirely too tempting a target for anyone who desired such power. With the destroyer gone, they could no longer guarantee that thieves would be stopped before they could make their escape. That made the weapons stored there a liability now, more than ever. They either needed to be gone or in use. Frigga knew that most of them would have to be destroyed. The only exception to this command is the casket of ancient winters, that is to remain in the vault untouched. If my trip to Jotunheim bears sufficient fruit, it may be returned to its rightful owners. Frigga continued. Tyr bowed. As you command, my queen, he said. I shall see to the vault contents personally. He then hurried off, presumably to deal with that situation right now. Frigga then turned to the warriors and Sif. Pack for an extended trip and bring your horses. We're going to need them. The four of them immediately left to do as she bid. Frigga then left the throne room to take her own advice, and to take a few minutes to make her armor real. That required that she stop by the palace smithy. With real armor-quality metal under her hands, it was the work of but moments to make a real version of the illusory armor she'd been wearing. Once made, she donned it and let the illusion fade. She could have conjured the metal herself, of course, but such a task was draining even for her, so it was just easier to wait and use metal that already existed. Once she returned to her quarters, she swiftly packed a few changes of clothes, enough knives to make even Loki envious, a sleep sack, her healer satchel, and a food satchel. The latter had powerful enchantments on it to preserve food, and to allow the holder to pull foodstuffs from the palace kitchens, at need. There was a series of special closets in the kitchens that were kept full of various foodstuffs for that purpose, as such satchels were standard issue for soldiers and anyone from the palace that went on a journey. They had eliminated the need for and vulnerability of supply trains. The healer satchels similarly had access to supply closets in the healer's wing, though those satchels were only given out to people who had some knowledge of healing. That done, she made her way to the stable. This time, however, she did not go to Aiden's stall. While Aiden was a more than adequate mount, and much beloved by Frigga, this was another case of needing to project the right image, and a slender chestnut mare just didn't. There was, however, one horse in Asgard guaranteed to make anyone pay attention. Sleipnir was Loki's pride and joy, and all the evidence anyone needed of his potential as a mage. Long ago, in one of his bids to gain Odin's approval, Loki had worked powerful enchantments on the best stallion and mare in the palace stables. Sleipnir had been the result. Bigger, stronger, faster, and far more intelligent than any other horse on Asgard, with a magically extended lifespan and courage enough to stand firm in the face of any danger or threat, and if given his head, even attack it. He had made a more than admirable war horse for Odin. Frigga approached the large stall with connecting paddock. Sleipnir, who'd been resting in his stall with his nose almost on the floor, immediately picked his head up. Greetings, Sleipnir, Frigga said, then stroked the velvety nose when Sleipnir looped his head over the gate of his stall. You will be pleased to learn that Loki is doing well, finally. I think Midgard will be good for him. Certainly they seem to understand him better than most here. Sleipnir gave a deep-chested grunt of pleasure. I have banished Odin. He was about to renounce Thor and Loki, both for daring to be their own men. That made Sleipnir stomp several of his feet, ears flicking back in displeasure. Worse, Thanos is headed for Midgard. We need to prepare the realms. If he reaches Midgard and conquers it, the realms are lost. Frigga stroked his nose again. Will you bear me to Svartalfheim and Jotunheim? Odin is in Svartalfheim, but they must be warned. And I have to at least try to get through to whoever succeeded Laufey on Jotunheim's throne. Sleipnir bobbed his head under her hand, then cheekily lifted her hair, giving it a gentle, affectionate tug. Excellent. We will be traveling with the Warriors 3 and Lady Sif, so do try not to run the horses into the ground, if you would. Sleipnir opened the gate to a stall. It was the very rare lock that could stymie him, and made his way to where his tack was kept and gave a sharp neigh. Much to Frigga's amusement, that was sufficient to summon the horsemaster. What's this, Sleipnir? Odin's not... Then he spotted Frigga. Oh, I see. Taking him with you to the realms, your majesty. Wise decision. I'll get him tucked up directly. That was a relief to Frigga. Sleipnir was entirely too tall, and his tack too heavy, for her to do it herself without resorting to magic. She'd do it that way when they were traveling, of course, but she wanted to conserve her strength where she could. My thanks, she said. A few minutes later, Sif and the warriors arrived, immediately going to their own horses and beginning to tack them up for the journey. To which realm do we travel first, your majesty? Sif asked. Svartalfheim, I think, Frigga said. It will be less fraught with difficulties and take less time. She eyed the warriors. Know this. Odin is there, somewhere. You are not to acknowledge him in any way if we encounter him. Do so, and you will join him in disgrace and banishment. The warriors all bowed and acknowledged her orders. One by one they mounted their horses, Frigga going last, as Sleipnir was liable to become impatient with standing about once a rider was aboard him. As they started out of the stables, the ambassadors charged with visiting the other realms arrived. It would seem that Heimdall is going to be having a busy day, Frigga commented with some amusement. When they arrived at the broken end of the bridge, now much closer to its original endpoint thanks to the continuing repairs, Frigga spoke briefly with Heimdall. Keep Thanos under watch, Heimdall. If he does anything other than travel in Midgard's direction, no matter how trivial, inform Tyr at once, and myself if I have returned to Asgard by then.
Heimdall nodded gravely. I will do so.
He intoned, then manipulated the Tesseract container to send them on their way.